Well, here's the other big headline today. The government has formed a task force to draft a new direct tax legislation. In fact, members of that committee, Shri Arvind Modi, Girish Ahuja, Rajiv Memani, Mukesh Patel, Mansi Kedia and Mr. GC Srivastava. Joining us is Mr. GC Srivastava himself, and also with us our colleague Arun Giri from taxsutra.com. Appreciate you joining us, Mr. Srivastava. Many thanks for joining us. I'm just looking at the terms of reference for the task force, sir. The direct tax system prevalent in various countries is something that the committee will have to look at. Will examine international best practices, the economic needs of the country, and any other matter connected thereto. Mr. Chidambaram had a ready direct tax code which he wanted to put forward. Unfortunately, he couldn't. What is the need of the hour today in the context of where things stand, Mr. Srivastava?
Need that I feel is that there have been not many developments at international level in regard to cross-border taxation. And the domestic law has to keep pace with those developments.
Okay, so you're saying that we need to align ourselves to international best practices, so that is one specific area that we need to look at. But what about things like the recommendations that were proposed as part of the earlier direct tax code bill under the UPA, sir? Do you believe that some of that may still be relevant today?
The committee will certainly, the new committee will also consider all those documents that are already there.
Okay. Arun?
Yeah, Shereen, a quick introduction of Mr. GC Srivastava. He's a former Director General of Income Tax, famously led the charge in the Vodafone case for the government right up to the Supreme Court. It was when he was the DG that the order was in fact passed on Vodafone, and then currently he represents the revenue and the taxpayers in the Delhi High Court as a special counsel. So he's still a government counsel, a special counsel for the government in all the big tax cases, and he's won several of them. I have a comment here, is that if you look at the earlier DTC 2009, GC sir, it looked at a very wide scope for tax rates. It said that the tax slabs, that 1.6 to 10 lakh rupees would be taxed at 10%, between 10 and 25 lakh at 20%, and over 25 lakh at 30%. And even 8 years later, we are nowhere even close to these slabs. It said that we will do away with several deductions and exemptions. And it also said that we will bring down the tax rate, the corporate tax rate, to 25%, which still, even though the government has laid out a roadmap, is nowhere close to 25% currently. So, sir, my question is that some of these things, what were proposed, were radical, and the ethos behind the Direct Tax Code 2009, and coincidentally, the person chairing this committee is also the person who drove the DTC 2009, Mr. Arvind Modi. So the person has not changed. Will the ethos also remain the same, sir? Lower tax rates, lesser exemptions, and maybe, looking at more certainty and a simple tax code.
Yeah. Arun, we had lost Mr. Srivastava. He's just back with us. Mr. Srivastava, Arun was asking you specific questions on whether the ethos of the recommendations made by the previous, under the UPA, under the stewardship of Mr. Arvind Modi will still be relevant today, sir. And also in terms of rationalization as far as the rate slabs were concerned, how relevant are those recommendations in today's context?
See, I have just got this flash news about this constitution of the committee. There has been no formal meeting of the committee, so I cannot really make any comments on what would be the approach of the committee. But certainly, all those changes which have been proposed or earlier made a part of record, they will be deliberated and considered, I believe so.
Rephrase the question.
Okay, Arun, go ahead with your question. Mr. Srivastava, Mr. Srivastava, just hold on. We've got Arun with us also. Go ahead, Arun.
Yeah. GC sir, one more question. That the ethos of the Direct Tax Code 2009 was simple tax code which will give certainty and lesser litigation, sir. What we have seen in the last 8 years is explosion of tax litigation. So, I'm sure that you being a person in the litigation world, a special counsel for the government, also for the taxpayers, probably one of the key objectives would be to draft a tax code which gives lesser room for interpretations and more certainty.
The attempt of government has been, you have seen in the last 2-3 years, there have been several attempts to reduce the areas of litigation. So many circulars, guidelines have already been issued. And I think that attempt would be carried forward in this work as well.
Fine. And sir, when we look at a new direct tax legislation, sir, I'm sure that we'll also take inspiration from some other countries. Anyway, the task force recommendation, the constitution document says that you will look at international best practices. Sir, you are having the US right now looking at passing the tax reform bill. The House of Representatives has passed it. It will go to Senate. But they are attempting something radical, cutting the headline corporate tax rate by up to 10 to 15%. So, do you think, sir, that maybe we could look at doing something radical, that you cut the headline rates, like what Mr. Kelkar committee also suggested, that you cut the headline rate of taxes and that will improve the compliance. The tax compliance rate will improve, which quite honestly in India, sir, we all admit, it's quite abysmal.
See, I cannot make any comment at this point. I mean, just I said, we don't have any formal communication or meeting as yet. But yes, the term of reference of this committee itself provides for taking into account the best international practices. So that is one of the key objectives.
Mm-hmm. So since you come from
the committee has to submit its report in 6 months, right, sir?
Yeah, no, I am not really aware of the deadline. What would be the deadline? I'm not really aware.
Okay.
Fine. And sir, considering the fact that, Shereen, just one last question, that considering the fact that we've already had 2 hits at the cherries, so you're confident that this time the efforts of your committee hopefully will not go waste, and this will be considered by the government and the parliament sooner rather than later?
I at least hope so.
Yeah. Thanks, GC sir. Thank you so much for joining us. I think he's just got probably he's not yet even seen the terms of reference, Shereen. But I think the fact that you have a senior, seasoned person like Mr. GC Srivastava, who's a whole department hand, a veteran, as a part of this committee, I think shows the seriousness of the government in seeing this through. The only point that I have here is that income tax legislation, redrafting of the income tax legislation is a bigger minefield than the GST itself, and I stand by that statement, Shereen.
Well, so get ready for spending many more weekends in office, Arun. That's what it sounds like. But of course, today is the day that the government has announced setting up of this committee under the chairmanship of Arvind Modi. And of course, the chief economic advisor will be a permanent member of the committee. GC Srivastava will be a member of that tax panel as well. Arun, Mr. Srivastava, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here.